Well, Infinity War is finally upon us, everybody. You can check out my full spoiler-free review for that movie in my video catalog right now, so go ahead and check that out and tell me what you thought about the movie down in the comment section below. But it is time to rank all 19 of the MCU movies. 10 years of Marvel movies. Holy shit. This franchise is awesome. Not all of these movies are like some of my favorite movies of all time, but just the fact that we have this awesome continuing franchise for the past 10 years where there's not a single movie on this list, even the ones at the bottom, that I would say are terrible movies or bad movies or movies that you shouldn't watch. Even the worst MCU movie is watchable. Now, speaking of that one, we'll go ahead and kick it off with number 19. I'm probably not going to get into super in-depth thoughts on all these movies because we got 19 of them to talk about, but feel free to let me know your ranking down in the comment section below and we will talk about them further. Number 19, Iron Man 2. This movie is basically a gigantic commercial for the Avengers. It's got some entertaining moments. Tony Stark is still great, Robert Downey Jr. is still great, but both of the villains are wasted in Whiplash and Justin Hammer. The ending climax fight is basically just a repeat of what happened in the first movie. You get the introduction of this new version of War Machine, who honestly I don't think is nearly as good, even though I love Don Cheadle. Not nearly as good as Terrence Howard's version. Just a decent sequel. It's a giant commercial for the Avengers, not so much an Iron Man movie. Number 18 is going to be Thor: The Dark World. Now, still an entertaining enough sequel, but this is still in the realm of when Thor was kind of this weird redheaded stepchild of the MCU. He still hadn't quite found his footing as a character, still hadn't quite found his footing as far as his side characters and his standalone movies, even though I really like Thor. You'll see that higher on this list, obviously. Thor: The Dark World is a very unmemorable villain to the point where I can barely even remember what the hell their point was in the movie. I remember the guy's name is Malekith. I remember he's an elf. That's about it. The side characters in Thor are some of the worst characters in the entire MCU as far as Natalie Portman's character, especially Kat Dennings' character, just not very compelling at all. Loki's great, all the stuff on Asgard is great, all the stuff outside of Asgard, not so much. Number 17, controversial pick, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I actually was really disappointed in this movie last year when it came out. Guardians is way high on this list, you will find it. So Guardians 2, I had huge expectations, and the movie just felt so off. You could tell that James Gunn had way more control over this movie than he did the first movie, and to me, that did not add anything to this. It actually took away. It's a lot more mean-spirited, not nearly as enjoyable. The jokes seemed like they were just coming a mile a minute, whether or not they worked or not. The characters didn't seem nearly as enjoyable. I didn't care for the way that they did the villain Ego and the way that Star-Lord's backstory played out. The villains, aside from Ego, the Sovereign, are some of the worst of the MCU. A lot of disappointments with this movie. Still enjoyable enough, but even upon second watch, this is just a very disappointing sequel to a great original movie, Guardians of the Galaxy. Number 16 for me is going to be Doctor Strange. Now, while I like Benedict Cumberbatch as an actor, while I think that the unique aspects of this kind of wizardry, weird, alternate reality and alternate realms version of the MCU is very unique and very fresh, it still feels so redundant because the MCU formula is 100% taking a hold of this movie. Whenever I saw it, it felt like beat for beat like an Iron Man movie like I'd already seen. Everything I could see a mile away as far as how everything was going to play out. There was no surprises. The villain was very weak and very vanilla. I enjoy the movie. I think that it's cool to watch. I think the special effects were great. Obviously, they were nominated for an Oscar. And I do enjoy the character of Doctor Strange, especially now seeing more of him in Infinity War and a little bit in Thor Ragnarok, but this original movie, his first movie, Doctor Strange, to me, is just a decent introduction. Number 15, another controversial pick, is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, I know how controversial my picks are as far as my favorite Spider-Man movies. Go check out my Spider-Man ranking video and you'll see what I'm talking about. All the comments down below in that. I'm a huge fan of the Sam Raimi movies, even the third one. Do not like the Amazing Spider-Man movies at all. This one falls where in the middle for me to where I like Tom Holland's version. I like the high school character. Loved Vulture as a villain. Really liked the kind of high school feel and the new version of this character that we got. But the side characters were terrible. Didn't even really care for his friend that much. Really didn't care for Flash Thompson and all the other side characters in the high school. Didn't think that the side villains of Shocker and the Tinkerer were very interesting. There's some great things about this movie, but there was a lot of things that really dragged it down for me. Upon second watch, I think that the things that I loved even more. The things that annoyed me even more, and that's why it falls so low on this list. Still a good introduction to this new MCU version of Spider-Man. Hopefully the sequel works a little bit better for me, but For now, Spider-Man Homecoming is sitting right here in this comfortable spot. Number 14, the redheaded stepchild of the MCU, the Incredible Hulk. Now, I think this movie is actually a really good standalone movie. I think it's much better than that Ang Lee piece of shit that we got. But unfortunately, it just feels like the MCU has abandoned this movie completely. It doesn't really get referenced aside from Thunderbolt coming back in Civil War and in Infinity War. It feels like they just kind of want to wash their hands of this movie. I know there's some rights issues with being able to, balance the rights to use Hulk for his own standalone movie. They can only use him as a side character, which really sucks because he's a great character, but I think that Edward Norton's version is really good. I think that the Abomination's a cool villain. I think that it's some of the best Hulk fighting that you're going to see, but it just feels so out of place within this universe because Marvel doesn't even really acknowledge this movie, so that's why it's so low on this list, despite being an enjoyable first outing for the Incredible Hulk in the MCU. Number 13 is going to be the Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, a lot of people really dislike this movie, and I understand some of the reasons why. I still have a lot of fun with it. I think a lot of the charm of the first Avengers is here. A lot of the fun of this group interaction is here. A lot of the gravity of Ultron, to me, it was better in the trailers than it was in the actual movie. Ultron seemed very, intense and intimidating in the trailers, and you get to the movie and he's very jokey, he's very quippy, he's basically like kind of a rip-off of Tony Stark, and it's part of the storyline that he has the personality of Tony Stark. To me, it could have been, that's where some of the Marvel jokes get in the way of having a really dramatic story to me. You have the introduction of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, where Scarlet Witch was a really good introduction, Quicksilver not so much in my opinion. You get a little bit more from Hawkeye, you get a little bit more from Hulk, being that him and Black Widow are in a little bit of a relationship. There's some interesting things in this movie. It's a very entertaining movie, just not as awesome as it should have been, mostly because of the mishandling of the villain Ultron, in my opinion. Number 12 is going to be Thor. Now, I really like Thor because it feels kind of like this Shakespearean story. It feels very unique and fresh amongst the MCU, especially when it was getting started out. This was directed by Kenneth Branagh, and that's kind of his thing. I think that Thor is a really cool character in this. He's kind of like the selfish, immature Thor. He's not the grown-up Thor that we've come to know now. I like that whole struggle. I love Anthony Hopkins as Odin. The whole scene whenever, Thor is getting ready to take on the frost giants, and he's like, "Father, we will take them on together," and he goes, "Silence." All that Anthony Hopkins shit, I love. I think Loki's a great villain. I think that, obviously one of the best villains in the MCU. He's one of the favorites, and this is where he got his start. All the side characters, as far as the Asgardian characters, I think are great. All of the human characters is what drags this movie down quite a bit for me. Really, even the second movie, even more. And that's just Natalie Portman's doesn't have that much chemistry with Thor. Kat Dennings and all the other scientist characters aren't that interesting, and they're borderline annoying. But I like the story, I like the Shakespearean aspects, and all of the Asgardian stuff is what brings this up so high to number 12. Number 11 is going to be Captain America, the First Avenger. I love World War II stories and World War I stories, so this just kind of has all of my interests wrapped around it. I love the character of Captain America. I love Chris Evans in the role. I like the whole aspect of him being this, frail, kind of sickly person that just really wants to just give everything he has to his country, and then he finally gets the super serum, and he's the biggest, badass, most good-looking guy in the whole fucking face of the planet, and now he gets to be the badass that he always wanted to be. Red Skull's a pretty cool villain. I think the relationship between Captain America and Agent Carter is some of the best, if not the best, relationship, love drama in the entire MCU, and very tragic the way that all plays out, and I love how they carry it on throughout the trilogy. A lot of great things about this movie. Really, it's just the character of Red Skull being kind of this, more of a cliche Nazi character, and especially how they kind of montage through all of the World War stuff and kind of just get to this comic booky kind of conclusion instead of letting us really marinate in the war setting. Brings it down a little bit for me, but still a great introduction to Captain America. Number 10 is Ant-Man. Had a lot of fun with this movie, had a lot of surprises, was not expecting anything from this character, never heard of it before in my life. You put Paul Rudd in there, instantly I'm interested. I love Paul Rudd, he's great in the role. You got Michael Douglas. I think the Yellow Jacket's actually a pretty decent villain. He's a little bit, a bit of a redundant villain, but I like the way that it all plays out. I like the actor Corey Stoll. I think the character of what will eventually become the Wasp, she was really good, Evangeline Lilly. I think that the whole heist aspect of this movie is really good. There's some really good side characters, a lot of great humor. I had fun with this movie. Ant-Man was a nice little surprise. Number 9 was the previous new release before Infinity War came out, Black Panther, the movie that took over the world for a month or so. And I enjoy Black Panther. Not nearly as high on my list as some people's, and it's mostly just because that I think that Black Panther is a really interesting character, but he's like the least interesting character in his own movie. But he's still a cool character. I think that the whole thing about Wakanda, the whole world building aspect of Black Panther is spot on. I love all the side characters, especially, I forget the actress's name, but Michonne is a really cool character. Killmonger, great villain. Didn't quite get enough of him. That's what brings it down a little bit for me too. Everything you do get is great, but I just wanted more from him. I wanted more about what made him become the character that he is. We just kind of get told why instead of shown why. I would have rather seen why. A lot of great war settings. A very fresh feel for an MCU movie. This is about a king and his kingdom. It doesn't really feel like a superhero movie. Black Panther was great. Number 8 is the one that started it all, the original Iron Man. This brought us Robert Downey Jr. back into the forefront, became the world's biggest actor, if he's still the top A-list, top paid actor, which I'm sure he is, because he's a smart motherfucker when it comes to money. Brought us that, brought the MCU to us, brought the character of Iron Man to us. Robert Downey Jr. makes this movie. He kills it as Tony Stark and Iron Man. I think that the villain of Obadiah Stane is a really good villain. I think that just the whole fresh feel this movie had back in 2008 was just such a kick in the teeth for comic book movies. You know, it came out the same year as Dark Knight too, so it really got double kicked in the teeth. You know, it was like a 1-2 punch that year. But Iron Man is just such a fun movie. It's such a cool movie. It's a really good story. You got this guy who's this selfish, self-centered prick. He gets brought down to his fucking knees by these terrorists, decides to use his powers for good, and now we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Thank you, Iron Man. Number 7, probably the most controversial pick on this list. Yes, I have a lot of controversial picks. It's my thing, I'm sorry. I usually just do my opinion, whether you like it or not. I'm being honest with you. Number 7 is Iron Man 3. Yes, I have it above the original Iron Man. A lot of people hate this movie for understandable reasons. All the reasons you hate it, it actually makes this movie more entertaining for me. I think that Robert Downey Jr. is on point with this. I'm a Shane Black fanatic. So yes, Shane Black writing and directing this movie makes it for me. I actually like the Mandarin twist. Is it as awesome as the Mandarin just being the villain at the end? No, but I thought it was entertaining. It actually made me laugh. It still makes me laugh when I see it. I like both the duality sides of Ben Kingsley's performance of this intimidating villain and this gigantic British pussy. I love all of that stuff. I know it's sacrilegious to comic book fans, but as a movie fan watching this, it entertains me. I think that the whole aspect of him being on his own and it being more of a Tony Stark movie than an Iron Man movie was really good. I like his interaction with that kid, the whole Extremis project. I even like Aldrich Killian a little bit more than most people, although I do think he's among the weaker of the MCU villains. I still like Guy Pearce in the role. I enjoy this movie. I think that it's a blast to watch. I'm a Shane Black fanatic. This is a Shane Black movie set in the MCU. That's all I need. Number 6 is Thor Ragnarok. Way up there, baby. Thor Ragnarok was a damn good time. I enjoyed it in the theaters. I enjoyed it 10 times more when I rewatched it at home about 2 or 3 weeks ago after it came out on Blu-ray. This movie is a lot of fun. Thor is at his best. He's at his funniest. He's at his most charming. Hulk is awesome. You finally get a Hulk that's actually like a living, breathing character because he can talk and interact. The whole world of this, you know, weird Colosseum gladiator planet led by Jeff Goldblum of all people. That stuff's all great. Loki's really fun. All the Asgardian stuff and everything going on with Hela is really interesting. All the kind of weird, quirky 80s stuff actually works in this, even though I feel like that's a really tired trope nowadays. I like that it kind of works with this movie. The soundtrack's great. Thor Ragnarok was a blast. Number 5 is the movie that we have all been waiting for, Avengers Infinity War. Shot all the way up into the top 5. It is that damn good. Infinity War totally nailed all of the stakes and the gravity and the intensity that they have been talking about and been building up to for the past 10 years. Thanos is completely 100% meeting what they told us this character was going to be as far as how intimidating and how just destructive he is. They have so many characters to balance. They do a damn good job at balancing it. There's a little bit of story issues with balancing so many characters, but the flaws in this movie are so overshadowed by the positives. Great action scenes, great character moments, really emotional moments. Again, another small flaw that I feel like the deaths don't have quite the impact that they should have just because the MCU has a really bad habit of fake deaths and resurrections. But nonetheless, Avengers Infinity War, this is a movie that I feel like it's going to get better every single time that I watch it. I'm still thinking about it. There hasn't been a Marvel movie in a while that I've watched, and I'm still thinking about it 2 or 3 days later. Infinity War, man, what an epic achievement, all the way up there at number 5. Number 4 is going to be Captain America Civil War. This was a damn good wrap-up for the Captain America trilogy. You got Captain America versus Iron Man. Two of the best characters in the MCU, two of the best acting performances of the MCU, two completely different ideologies, and you can understand both of them. That's what makes the fight so great. There's not like a clear-cut villain or hero. You can understand where Tony Stark and Captain America are coming from completely, and you just watch it all unfold. You got one of the greatest action scenes ever put to film in this whole airport sequence. You get the introduction of Black Panther and the introduction of Spider-Man, and both are handled great. The whole way that they bring the whole story of Winter Soldier to this nice little crescendo in this. Everything about Captain America Civil War was awesome, and I even like the villain Zemo. Yes, he's superfluous to the movie. He has no point in being there. You could have this movie and take Zemo out of it and it would work just the same. But the emotional aspect of Zemo as a villain that's just kind of pulling the strings from behind the scenes, I really like that. So Captain America Civil War, one hell of a sequel, one hell of a third outing for a trilogy, and one hell of an MCU movie. That is number 4. Number 3 for me is going to be the first Avengers. This movie had so much to prove. It had so many weights on its shoulders, so many expectations to meet for these MCU fans. Building up to this as this huge promise and this huge experiment and this huge achievement for comic book film, and it knocked it out of the park. Joss Whedon did this movie perfectly. The only negative in this entire movie for me is I think that Captain America's suit looks silly. I wish they would have had more the look of Captain America Winter Soldier in Civil War, but nonetheless, small flaw. Everything else about this, the character interactions, the humor, the action scenes, the interaction of these characters for the first time, all of it is just so awesome and epic. I mean, you cannot recreate how awesome it is to see all these characters get together for the first time like we saw in the first Avengers movie. The Avengers is badass. That is number 3. Top 2. Number 2 is Guardians of the Galaxy. This movie I expected absolutely nothing from. Had no idea what the hell the Guardians of the Galaxy was. The trailers looked interesting enough, but it just felt like some weird little experiment. It felt like it was going to be the first failure in the MCU, and it was anything but. These characters are among my favorites in the entire MCU. I think that the acting performances of Chris Pratt and even Batista, I mean, Vin Diesel, you get everybody in this movie is just awesome in their characters. Yondu, such a great character. The villain is actually pretty interesting, Ronan the Accuser. Such a fun movie. I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack is one of the best parts about it. It's one of the few movie soundtracks that I've actually downloaded and listened to multiple times. Love Guardians of the Galaxy. I could take this movie and rewatch it 100 times and still laugh my ass off and have a blast with it. It's a classic in my mind. That is my number 2. But still my reigning champ of number 1 best MCU movie, and ironically enough, my favorite comic book movie of all time. I love it that much. Captain America the Winter Soldier. This movie is awesome. No flaws for me whatsoever. The Russo brothers nailed it with this. I think that this is one of the best comic book sequels, and obviously it's my favorite comic book movie of all time just because it delivers so much. Not only is the character of Captain America like one of the greatest comic book characters ever, especially on film. You get this introduction of Falcon, you get a really good interaction with him and Black Widow, and it doesn't feel like this weird like sexual tension relationship thing that it would be in any other lesser movie. It feels like it's genuine friendship and partnership. You get a great villain in Alexander Pierce and the Winter Soldier. The way that that whole story unfolds about him finding out that it's Bucky and trying to bring his friend back. All of the 70s spy espionage flavor they put in this. The action scenes, literally some of the best action scenes I've ever seen in my life. Not just in a comic book movie, in any movie, period. That elevator scene is one of my favorite movie scenes of all time. I can gush about this movie for an hour. I love everything about Captain America the Winter Soldier. There are some gigantic shoes to fill if any other MCU movie ever wants to dethrone this one as my number 1 because it is way the hell up there. As much as I love Guardians of the Galaxy, you got Guardians of the Galaxy right here at number 2, about 100 feet of mountain, and then you have Captain America Winter Soldier reigning champion at number 1. So that is my number 1 Marvel Cinematic Universe film, Captain America the Winter Soldier. Well, that's my new ranking of the MCU, guys. All 19 movies, all the way through to Infinity War. What is your ranking? Post your ranking down below in the comment section below, guys, and we will discuss the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you want to check out some of my social media links, click the video description below for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spreadshirt, and my Patreon page. And if you guys want to check out some more of my videos, including all of my other comic book rankings, Marvel Cinematic Universe reviews, and my Infinity War spoiler-free review, check all that out by clicking right over here.